the afternoon session of the Northwest Nuclear Exploration event here in Ignace, Ontario. Welcome for joining us this afternoon. This presentation is the All Voices panel. So this panel will be populated by two of the regional voices representing those that are concerned about the environmental storage of used nuclear fuel in northwestern Ontario, as well as two local voices who will both share their experiences from a township willingness and impact perspective. The All Voices panel will garner both sides of the nuclear waste dialogue and will be moderated by Councillor Dodie with the Township of Ignace. As part of the panelists, I would like to welcome Brennain Lloyd with Northwatch. We also have Dodie LeGassick with Environment North, Brad Greaves, resident and entrepreneur of the Township of Ignace, and Lionel Cloutier, as well as a resident and entrepreneur with the Township of Ignace. So, big round of applause for our panelists today.
Thank you. First, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on Grand Council Treaty Number 3 territory, and then the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Métis people, specifically the traditional territory of the peoples of Wapigoon Lake First Nation. I respectfully acknowledge the Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of the land. Thank you. I'm Jody DiFio, counselor and registered nurse in this community. I will be moderating today's discussion, and we will start with each person introducing themselves and giving you a little bit of history of who they are.
Good afternoon. I'm Brennain Lloyd, and I work with Northwatch, and we're a regional environmental non-governmental organization, and we're part of the broader coalition or alliance of We the Nuclear Free North, which includes groups from across Northern Ontario. And Northwatch was actually formed. One of the motivating forces for Northwatch forming as a coalition in 1988 was the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited's geological disposal concept was going to a federal review, and it was in many respects the precursor to the WMO project, which you've been hearing so much about for the last 10 years. And our commitment to working on this issue, to supporting community decision-making, began in the 1980s, some of our founding members in the 1970s, and continues through to this day. So I've been had the opportunity to be in Ignace many times since 2010, and it's been a great visit this week, and thank you all for coming out.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you. This is a beautiful turnout. I'm really happy to see such a good attendance. My name is Dodie LeGassick, and I'm the nuclear lead for Environment North. Environment North has been a not-for-profit charitable organization since 1972, and we deal with forestry matters, mining, in this case, nuclear. So I'm the nuclear lead for Environment North. And my background is as a secondary high school teacher, but I moved to Northwestern Ontario in the 1970s to work simply because it was nuclear free. And so it's ironic that here I find myself following this passion of mine in Northwestern Ontario in opposition to nuclear. But anyways, thank you for being here.
Hello, I'm Lionel Cloutier. I was an entrepreneur. I'm now a retired person. And I'm not a paid member of anything right now. Actually never was from the NWMO, so this is just from myself. I care very much about my community, and this is why I took the opportunity to speak to everyone when I was asked. I jumped on the opportunity because I think I have something in common with these ladies over here, as well as all the other naysayers in this room. because 18 years ago or so, when I was mayor, and one of my councillors picked up a pamphlet at a Toronto show, brought it to council and said that we were going to discuss this project. And I said, well, absolutely no, because we can't go ahead with that because, well, 20 years before that, it was introduced by ECL and Ignace, and I was one of the most vocal person that went to the town council and complained we don't want to hear anything of this here, because my thought is probably the same as what a lot of you people think it is. My thought was that they're going to dig a hole and put this down the ground, you know, this type of thing, or that all I could think of was a nuclear bomb. And this thing is not about nuclear bombs. This is a facility. It's not dump. So that's about all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. My name is Brad Greaves, and I've lived in Ignace since 1985. I am a local businessman, or have been. I'm retired now. I've been involved with sports, both playing them and coaching kids for many, many years. I've been involved in virtually every committee that is possible to sit on in this community. And as I said, now I'm retired. But I have chosen to stay in Ignace, and this is where we live. I'm a graduate of both Lakehead University and Confederation College. And my wife and I, for over 30 years, ran a very successful resource-based tourism business here out of Ignace. And it was quite large. We brought tens of thousands of people to this area. I also was a commercial pilot for 40 years and intimately involved in safety and safety management systems, particularly in seaplane safety, and I've been involved in national initiatives on seaplane safety. I've been involved in many tourism boards and committees provincially and regionally, and have sat on the Ontario Forest Policy Committee, as well as the Ontario Big Game Management Committee. I have 3 children, 7 grandchildren. I've been able to tour the depository in Finland, as well as see Darlington facilities, McMaster University reactor, and the test facilities in Oakville. I have to assure you that I would never, ever support anything that would put my kids or your kids or grandkids in jeopardy in their futures. In short, I am a resident. I'm legitimately concerned about the social and economic and environmental future of Ignace. And because I do actually see a few people here, I have to tell you this too. I do not work for the NWMO. I'm not brainwashed. I'm not out of my mind. I'm not motivated by greed. I'm not bribed, and I'm not a shill. Okay? We'll just get that out there now because I've heard that.
Thank you all for your enthusiasm, but we'll keep the applause for the end of today's discussion. Thank you. Thank you for your introductions, panelists. I'm going to give you your first question. Understanding clearly that the Township of Ignace only makes up one piece of the overall willingness puzzle in northwestern Ontario with respect to the siting of a deep geological repository by NWMO. Can you please provide your professional, personal perspectives or comments on the actual process undertaken to identify a willing community within Canada? And secondly, how can this process potentially impact either the Township of Ignace, Wabigoon Lake First Nation, or your group's advocacy efforts with NWMO?
Okay, it looks like I'm beginning at this end. So Canada has a plan for their long-term isolation of nuclear fuel, and it's going to be deep underground. I want to start with the way the process works, is that Ignace was not picked at random. Ignace chose to be part of the process. And the first stage of the process was learning more. I'll admit, when the first indication came that this process, the facility may be here, I knew nothing about nuclear. The only thing I knew about nuclear was that one of the former presidents of the United States couldn't say the word. But I committed myself to learning because I'm curious. So I attended NWMO sessions, I talked to NWMO people, I listened to experts, People like Dr. Deneuve and others who came to town. I went to the anti-nuclear presentations. I've watched them online, and I wanted to get the whole picture and make a decision for myself. One thing I did learn is the learning doesn't end. There's lots of learning, but the process is moving on. So a DGR requires a host community, and what that means is that even though the site is out of town, there needs to be a community that's willing to grow and develop with the project. We're in that willingness session right now where we're determining, is Ignace willing to be a host community? So we have to ask, what is willingness? Willingness is consent, and we hear that word a lot. It's free, it's prior, it's voluntary, it's without coercion, intimidation, manipulation. It must be self-directed by the community whom it is sought. And just go online, media, social media, you'll see that we are being coerced and intimidated. So I just want to say that that's what willingness is supposed to be. We are not deciding for the country. Ignace is not making any decision for anybody but Ignace. The decision as to where the DGR will be is up to the NWMO and the CNSC. They are the ones who will decide that once willingness is determined. We'll be going in after the willingness if it's determined to be in this area, and this is a preferred site. There will be licensing. The licensing process is onerous. What happens then is that really the rubber meets the road. That is where the NWO has to convince the licensing body that they're following the regulations, that they are safe, and that stage will include all the neighboring communities. That stage is going to include the First Nations. Yep, I got 30 seconds, I'm timing myself. All the First Nations, all the interveners will have an opportunity then. So after licensing comes operation and construction and operation. So we're not digging a hole in a month and throwing nuclear material on the ground. Okay, this is not for my generation. It's for the kids who are in school now, grade school. They're going to be the engineers and the scientists that will be living in this community.
I sure can. Understanding clearly that the Township of Ignace only makes up one piece of the overall willingness puzzle in northwestern Ontario with respect to the siting of a deep geological repository by NWMO, can you please provide your personal perspective or comments on the actual process undertaken to identify a willing community within Canada? And secondly, how can this process potentially impact either the Township of Ignace, Wabigoon Lake First Nation, or your group's advocacy efforts with NWMO?
Okay, like I already said, we were visiting a village, a meeting in Toronto, and someone had picked up the pamphlet, so Canada, I guess, was reaching out, looking for a place to put a DGR. So when that was brought forward, of course, like I said, my councillors also agreed that I would say no, but then it was worth. The majority said, well, let's check into it, and it's worth to go with to learn more about it. So for 2 years, between 2008 and 2010, before we actually decided that we're going to go ahead with the Learn More project, I spent a lot of time trying to qualify the fact that we could move forward, and I actually went to the Lakehead University even to listen to Gordon Edwards of all people, only to find out, that I wasn't told the truth there. But I wanted to hear what he had to say, and he almost, he was a very good speaker, but on the other hand, I have to weigh everything else. I also read a whole lot of information online, where I got encyclopedias, I looked up a whole bunch of stuff, and I realized that it wasn't as deadly as it seems to be, because there's a lot, like Brad said, there's a lot to learn, and when you hiring it all out, then it's worthy it's a worthy cause to carry forward because it looks to me that, especially now that people have gone to Finland, and that I also went to Kincardine, and I went to Ottawa to CNSC, Safety Commission, and to Transport Canada about the transportation, and I was positively motivated in the fact that this can be done successfully. Thank you.
Okay, so in answer to the first question, the NWMO siting process has been flawed from the onset. From the very beginning, NWMO has used ratepayers' money to gain entry into northern communities. NWMO has approached 22 communities who were suffering from economic marginality and who were geographically remote. They focused on these communities because they were vulnerable and often eager to accept anything to improve their marginal situations. This has been the case for Ignace and for Wabigoon. It is well known that throughout NWMO's siting process, that millions of dollars have been given to the township of Ignace and Wabigoon to induce both communities to adopt a favorable attitude towards the final disposal of high-level waste. Under Section 19 of the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, that's UNDRIP, NWMO has a duty to obtain free, prior, and informed consent. But free, by definition, implies that there is no coercion, no intimidation, and no manipulation. We argue that both communities, Wabigoon and Ignace, have been coerced and manipulated, and therefore your sense of willingness may be skewed and not free. We also argue that NWMO's siting process promotes regional injustices. This occurs when there is a disproportionate siting of polluting industries, and we're not talking industries in this case, but other environmental hazards in areas such as Treaty 3. In this case, Southern Ontario has benefited from the production of nuclear electricity, and Northern Ontario is expected to bear the burden of its waste. That the greatest impact will be in the Treaty 3 area also smacks of environmental racism. Step 4 of the siting process carries with it the promise to engage in a study of health, safety, environment, social and economic and cultural effects of the project at a broader regional level. They promise that as the siting process proceeds, a more regional perspective will become a focus. Instead, they have narrowly defined community as just Ignace and Wabigoon. As a result, the people of Ignace and Wabigoon have not been clearly informed about the broader aspects of this project. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, like Dodie, one of the comments I really want to emphasize is that the siting process itself has been flawed from the beginning. And in the 2008-2009 period, these flaws were out in draft documents, and the NWMO received advice identifying the flaws in the process, and they proceeded anyway. And I'll give you an example. It's a 9-step process. The compelling step 5, where we are now, the compelling demonstration of willingness, comes before the environmental impact process, now called the impact assessment process. That's when the NWMO will actually be required to provide a full description of their project, which they haven't to date. What we've got now before us is a set of concepts stitched together, some parts more detailed than others, but it's not a full plan. There are many areas in there as you step through transportation, processing at the used fuel packaging plant, burial, movement into the repository, and then long-term, lots of gaps, lots of undefined or conceptual descriptions of the project. So the EA is when NWMO can be expected to provide a full description. We're nowhere, we're not there. And then the contract in the earlier step, in the siting process, the contract would be signed before the environmental assessment was carried out. So it would be compelling demonstration of willingness, contract signed by the municipality, environmental assessment. Those were the steps. Then site characterization, which is when the predictions of the EA are proven to be correct or incorrect. Ignace has varied from that, and we have since March 18th had on the table a signed siting, a signed hosting agreement, signed final hosting agreement, which comes into play if Ignace Council delivers a willingness decision that says yes to staying in the NWMO process, that's saying yes to the deep geological repository. That yes or no, so the yes or no in the poll that opens on April 26th is a yes or no, not just to the NWMO project, but also to the hosting agreement. And the hosting agreement raises a number of additional issues in itself. So we've got a double set of concerns now for the people of Ignace and the region. Set of concerns about the NWMO project and a set of concerns about the future that the hosting agreement binds you to in terms of governance, democracy, economics, ability to speak on behalf of the people of Ignace.
Thank you for your perspective. I'm going to ask now the next question. Can you provide us with what your professional interpretation of what nuclear safety means to you, and how might that definition impact a decision that the people of Ignace or Wabigoon Lake First Nation may make on their own willingness journey?
It's me again. So nuclear safety, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission has a glossary of terms. You've maybe met the CNSC, they're Canada's regulator. They're the folks who issue licenses that permit nuclear operations. They have a glossary of terms. There is no definition of nuclear safety or even of safety in that glossary. So I looked to the International Atomic Energy Agency. This is how the international group of regulators defines it. The achievement of proper operating conditions, prevention of accidents, or mitigation of accident consequences, resulting in protection of workers, the public, and environment from undue radiation hazards. So I don't know where we draw the line between what radiation hazards were due and which ones are undue. In contrast, the ACL concept, which was the Atomic Energy Account Limited concept, which went through a 8-year review process in the 1990s. They were asked, the question that panel was asked to speak to is, has Atomic Energy of Canada Limited demonstrated their geological disposal concept to be safe and acceptable? And the panel said no. They said it's not been demonstrated to be acceptable, to have public acceptance. But they said on the safety side, there are two aspects. There's a social aspect of safety and there's a technical aspect of safety. And they said on the social side, no, not met, not demonstrated to be socially considered safe. On the technical side, they said something very general, technically feasible at a conceptual stage of development. So I think we need to contrast this idea that the IAEA puts out, that it's safety is protection from undue radiation hazards, against what's known as the BEER 7 report, the biological investigation of ionizing effects of radiation, the 7th report. This was National Academies of Sciences report several years ago. And what the Beer 7 report finding was that there is no acceptable level of exposure. There is no level of exposure to radiation that doesn't have a corollary assignment of risk. It doesn't mean every exposure to radiation is going to cause you an identifiable health impact, cancer or other immune system disorders. It means that there's some risk, and we're differently affected by that risk. Women more than men.
Thank you for your perspective.
Children more
we will
than
now hear from our next
adults, and
panelist.
so on.
All right, nuclear safety, some people would say, is a bit of an oxymoron. To me, the word safety is simply defined as the amount of risk that you're willing to accept. We argue that the people of Ignace and Wabigoon have not been properly informed about the risks of the NWMO's project. For example, does everyone here realize that your own household and property insurance policies, that within those policies, that no one has insurance coverage for a nuclear incident or nuclear contamination? So tonight, go and check your insurance policy, look under the category of loss and damage, and you're not covered. NWMO, second point, tells people not to worry that the nuclear fuel pellets about them because they are solids. So before they go through the nuclear fission process and go into that reactor, they are solids, that's true. But certainly not after the 10 and 18 months of a nuclear fission process. The pellets are indeed fractured, and those are fractured pellets that are in the used nuclear fuel bundles. Third, inherent in NWMO's project is the risk of transporting this most toxic, highly radioactive waste over the long, long distances from as far as 2,700 kilometers from Point Lepreau in New Brunswick and 1,700 kilometers from southern Ontario. That's just one way. Now from southern Ontario, 92% of the waste is going to be from there. Now that's over a 50-year time period. So if you consider the long, long distances and the large volumes, the projected figure is actually 7.2 million fuel bundles, and then you add on to that the time span of 50 years, the probability of an accident or accidents exists. Fourth, NWMO has told you that truck transportation is safe, that the UFTP has been certified and undergone rigorous tests. What they don't tell you is that they have never done full-scale testing. They've never done a full-scale actual testing with any full-size used fuel transportation package. They've only used half-size or 1/7 size models in the 1980s, that's 40-some years ago, for the drop and the puncture test, and only computer modeling for the thermal and the immersion tests. And you can check that with ALF. The 100-ton dry storage containers that they plan to use on the trains have not been rigorously tested, nor were they designed for long-distance travel.
Okay, what nuclear safety means to me, I think first of all, it's very important that the geology part of it, which is already being done. Like so far, I've done a lot of drilling on site, and so far have had good results. That doesn't mean that they will have all the good results. So, to me, if it's safe to put it there after they've done all their testing, so be it. But if it isn't, well, of course, I'm back to square one where I said no. And of course, I would hope that at that time that they would consider maybe a location east of here or further west of here or north or whatever in this area, because I do believe that Northwestern Ontario deserves deserves some economic benefits. See, as far as radiation, of course, we know that radiation is all around us, and the way it's been handled for the last 70 years, I guess nuclear has been around, and there's been no deaths as far as, related to that. I was actually surprised when I did my survey, my checking around when I was on the negative side, that there was no deaths including the US and Canada plants, that there was no deaths resulting from accidents. I know I've worked on pipeline construction before, and there's certainly radiation used there, and has been for the last 50 years or more, because they check the wells with radiation. I wasn't aware, but I'm more aware now that this is happening. At airports, there's radiation. You go to every hospital's got pretty well has X-rays and radiation equipment. They have a nuclear plant right in the Masters University, and I know there's a Dr. Jeremy Whitlock. I rely a lot on his information, and all of you people here should look into Jeremy Whitlock's site if you want to, because he's a great teacher there, but now he's in Vienna now. He's not working, he's never worked for NWO, but his comments are very good. Also monitoring, it's worldwide monitoring. Jeremy is actually in Vienna monitoring to make sure that there's no proliferation of...
Thank you, panelists, for your perspective. We will now hear from our next panelist.
Thank you, Lionel. Nuclear safety, just a second, I just lost everything I have here. Nuclear safety is a very big concern and a lot of aspects to it. I think that we have to consider underground isolation of the material, the repackaging, which was mentioned here, worker and community safety, environmental safety, and transportation. So, I want to ask a question here regarding the transportation. Is our highway safe? Is there anybody who'll put their hand up? Is our highway unsafe? Any hands? Anybody would agree with that? The highway is unsafe? Okay, I guess there's a lot of people who've never seen our highway. But I do ask that question for one reason, because I thought that maybe you guys would get it wrong, and you did, because I would not agree that the highway is unsafe. If the highway was unsafe, this room would be empty. Why on earth would anybody in their right mind get on that highway and travel to Ignace for this exposition? You just wouldn't do it. It is safe enough, right? It can be made safer, there's no doubt about that, but I'll tell you what, safety does not mean 100% without risk. It just doesn't mean that. Safety is mitigated risk. And to achieve that, you identify risks, you develop procedures or policies or barriers to mitigate the risk. It's not difficult to understand, but it is always misunderstood. That's my biggest concern with safety, is that people don't understand what it means. Go back to the highway. We have lanes, we have speed limits, we have cops on there, we have brakes on our cars, so risks have been identified and mitigated. It can be made more safe. Yes, there are accidents, I'll agree with that. But we accept those risks to get on the highway and get here. Nuclear safety is very similar. It is dangerous, I'll admit that. It can be made acceptably safe. Nuclear is understood now, it's well understood. And so because of that, we can design systems, or the NWO, or the scientists, they can design these systems. One thing I want to mention, the multi-barrier system. I've heard criticism about that. Well, if it's all so safe, why do they have to use multiple? I'll tell you, because they look ahead and say, okay, there's a risk, we'll make a barrier. Another risk, we'll make another barrier. So they build on top of that ahead of time. That's called adaptive safety management. How does it affect our willingness? We have to understand what safety is, understand how the process of safety works, how risk is mitigated, and how science and technology and engineering, policies, procedures, regulations, how that fits in there. And we have to put the scary stuff like unrelated nuclear accidents, catastrophic transport accidents, big words, talks of leaks, and doomsday
Thank you, panelists.
situations into context. Text without context is pretext.
I will now ask your next question. Can you provide, based on either your professional background or your personal experience, what the economic, tourism, social, and environmental impacts of this proposed DGR project mean to either Ignace or Waterloo Lake First Nations area? How could these opportunities or challenges change the trajectory of the future of this region?
Okay, this one is near to my heart. I've been a businessman in town for many years. The economic opportunities for a vibrant community is limitless with a DGR coming here. Just think of things like hotels and restaurants and updated services, government offices, cutting edge technology, jobs, increased tax base. There's all kinds of upside there. But I want to focus on what I know about, particularly, and that's tourism. Tourism is the largest industry in the world. It's almost $8 trillion. There's countries that their primary industry is tourism. It's sustainable, it's growing, it's renewable, it creates employment, creates a higher standard of living. Services and facilities that are developed through tourism benefit the locals too. I know about resource-based tourism. I was in the business for over 30 years. Hook and bullet, we call it. It's the hunting and fishing segment. Northwest Ontario, it is huge. It is our main source of tourism, I believe. But in the overall picture, it's very small, very small. To say that tourists wouldn't come to Ignace because there's a DGR here is not true. I've talked to hundreds of people, all my guests. I'd always ask them why they come. They come for the experience. They're fishermen, they come for the experience. The experience Northwestern Ontario offers is unavailable anywhere else. But one of the fastest growing segments of tourism right now is experiential tourism. And what that is traveling for new things, whether it be cultural tourism, culinary, learn new skills, adventure, and it also includes nuclear tourism. And yes, that is a thing. In Finland, Rauma, which is the host community for the repository and the nuclear power plants, it's a nuclear host community, tourism is booming. And you know what? They have two, not one, two UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Rauma. People come there for the nuclear, they can partake in the UNESCO Heritage Sites. They come for the UNESCO Heritage Sites, they have the opportunity to learn about the nuclear industry. Will a DGR bring tourism to Ignace? It already has. Anybody in this room, including our two fellow panelists, you know what? You're nuclear tourists now. You are. You're nuclear tourists. You're cutting edge, you're leading edge. You're first adopters. That's awesome. I like that. Welcome to Ignace.
30 seconds.
Okay. Forward-thinking, resource-based tourism people, that would be the fishing and hunting people in our Northwest region will embrace the DGR by working and partnering with other segments of the industry and packaging new adventures for the new world market that will be coming to Ignace. And these guys will be coming looking for more than just the science stuff. We have something awesome to offer. Package it, put it together, and they'll be the leaders in the new tourism industry.
Thank you. Thank you, panel. You took out a timer over there. Good job. We'll now hear from our next panelist.
Well, Brad, I have nothing left to say now. I think you said it all. So here my list is, I'm going to have to cut it down a little bit here because he's already said it. But anyway, one of my biggest concerns in Ignace, of course, is a continuation of Ignace, because right now we're really depleting and hurting hard. And our education, I'm worried about high school, very worried about high school. I didn't have the privilege of attending high school when I was in Ignace. So unfortunately I had to leave and go out of town, and I couldn't even come back to Ignace because there was nothing here for me. So that's why I went west for, like everybody else was going west for 6 years or so. And then when the mine came back, when I came back and visited at Christmas time, there at the mine in Ignace opened up, the Toby Mines, and at that time, almost the same as we are facing here today, was all the naysayers that didn't want the township to host the mining community. We had the same problem, but I took a big gamble. My wife and I took a big gamble, and we invested in a general store, and said we're going to make a go of this because the mine is going to go ahead, whether they establish here or they go to Silver Dollar or they establish just outside of town. But as it happened, our town went broke, and we got help from the government, and then the mine manager became the mayor, and they supported the housing development, and it went forward, and we survived. And I was happy to be able to raise my family here, and I hope my granddaughters and my grandkids can raise their family here as well, because Ignace was always home, no matter where I was. I was in Banff for a while, I was in BC, but I was never home. Home was Ignace. Anyway, this, to me, also the medical facilities, we have great medical facilities, but they could be a lot better. We have to save our clinic, our pharmacy. We need a pharmacy uptown where people can walk to it. We need our banks. We need housing for our seniors, like myself pretty soon. Maybe I want to stay here so my family can visit me. Perhaps it'll help all the communities around, it'll help them as well, like Dryden, their car rentals, the airport will help. Thunder Bay Airport will improve. They'll have more flights because there'll be more tourism, more people coming for these things.
Thank you, panelists, for your perspective. We'll now hear from our next
The Center of Excellence, I have to mention that.
Maybe on the next question. The next panelist, please.
Correction, I'm not up here as a tourist. The possibility of jobs in construction and other economic benefits are presented by NWMO to you as dangling carrots. It is these dangling carrots that may skew or interfere with people's perceptions of safety and raises big questions. Would the people of Ignace and Wabigoon be willing hosts without these dangling carrots? Do the dangling carrots affect your sense of willingness? People need to be reminded that Ignace has an aging population. The median age is 54 years. So who exactly stands to benefit? Local workers who are unskilled will be given lower paid jobs and the more dangerous work for which they're underprepared. Both communities must weigh the trade-offs. And by trade-offs, I mean that there will be disruption of livelihood and the image of your pristine environment, and property devaluation. Look at Elliott Lake. Will there be man camps? Will crime increase? Will the skilled workers want to live in Ignace or Wabigoon, or would they prefer to live in Dryden, a regional hub that offers a hospital, schools, and shopping centers? There will, without a doubt, be a new reputation for Ignace based on a nuclear stigma attached to this project that will carry with it serious negative economic and environmental consequences. We have 17,000 signatures, many from the people of northwestern Ontario. And each signature, every single signature, carries with it a conversation. And many of these conversations have reflected concerns about tourism, concerns about the future radioactive contamination of your waters, of the fish, of the wildlife, and the watersheds. People have said to us that they will think twice about coming here to visit their families, to fish, to swim, to hunt, and to hike, because this place will no longer be seen as pristine or as safe. The area will be known as a type of sacrifice zone. sacrifice to bury the waste from the south.
30 seconds.
Waste that will be radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years.
Thanks. So I think in economics, we often talk in terms of cost versus benefits. We do that in lots of discussions, cost versus benefits. So I think in response to this question, we're looking at the economic benefits paid to Ignace versus the lost opportunity costs. And I think I would encourage you to look at that in terms of the last 10 years as well as the next century plus. So what are the lost opportunity costs of having so much time and effort invested in the NWMO exercise to date? And what are the lost opportunity costs in the future in continuing to be as entangled with this single project as I expect Ignace would be if the project was to go forward? I think another place to look at in terms of thinking about what the economic benefits are or may be, the place we can see written down, the township or the NWMOs, I don't know who authored it, own estimate is the hosting agreement signed on March 18th. And there's a signing bonus of $500,000. There's a couple of milestone payments along the way. But look forward to 2050, just as a typical year. You look at 2015, there's $1.2 million operating and $60,000 in placement fees. Then there's $38,850 capacity support and governance. I'm going to speculate that that's to pay the municipalities' costs that they have for contributing to the implementation committee, basically managing their role in the process. $38,500. I don't know how much staff time that buys, but I suspect not enough. $83,000 in youth training. I've heard from people that's so important. $83,000 in youth training. So $1,396,000. I think, I don't have the numbers, but I think that's approximately the amount that Ignace has been getting through their arrangements with the NWMO for the last few years. Is that the benefit that the people of Ignace are expecting is going to come with this? And if the population grows and so on, which I've heard many people say they hope will happen, where does the money come from that? Where does the money come from for infrastructure and services? Is this project and its attachment or relationship to Ignace, is it even going to pay its way? And that, my other comments were around social division, and then the environmental impact. So there's lots of considerations.
For your perspective. So we have a very short little bit of time left. So for 2 minutes, I would like each of you to leave us with one last thought, impression, or advice that you want the people of Ignace to understand from this panel experience as they head into making a willingness decision in the next few months. You will note this is a shorter time period than other questions. So please, thank you.
Thank you. So my advice to the people of Ignace is to be critical thinkers. Where's the plan? Do you have a complete plan from the NWMO in front of you? Are those gaps filled? I don't think they are. What are the risks? Are they clearly set out? Who makes the decisions going forward, including into the future and the far future? Read the hosting agreement. It's a package deal. It's the NWMO project and the hosting agreement. Some of the things that I flagged in my read-through of the hosting agreement are concerns that the hosting agreement binds future councils. There is no way out. It binds future councils. It requires a statement of support from future councils at conferences, in regulatory settings, and so on. Council can, the agreement says council can speak critically at the impact assessment hearing, but generally, council will be bound to make statements of support. If I was a young person in council in Ignace and thought I might like to run for council in a decade or two, I think I'd be pretty put off by the fact that my requirements as a member of council included statements of support for a project that I don't even know how it's going to play out, because that's not even been assessed. And then there's provisions for confidentiality, and that includes keeping scientific and technical information confidential. I think the hosting agreements violate basic principles of democracy, freedom of information, and rights of expression. And I would really encourage people to be critical, scrutinize, read the hosting agreement, think about this as a package.
Perspective. We'll now hear from our next panelist.
Thank you. Okay, saying yes to this project will, saying yes to this project means that many, many others outside of your area, in fact millions, will be at some risk. Do you want to accept that responsibility when you say yes? My advice is that you become better informed. Make sure that you read. Make sure that you ask for this and read about it. It's the NWMO's latest implementation plan that goes to 2028. Because this new plan contains the possibility of major changes, and it still continues to have the option to have shallow storage repositories at the central site well before there's ever a DGR. Ask yourselves just who will benefit from this project over the long and the very short term. Who will be responsible for the site once it's abandoned, once it's covered up and abandoned in 200 years? NWMO says that it will be the community that is going to be responsible in their early documents. Lastly, all of us either have or we know children or grandchildren. I have grandchildren I'd like to visit here that we love. Be concerned that saying yes may result in serious intergenerational injustices where future upon future generations may be impacted by radiation, by accidents, or from the movement of radioactive isotopes into the biosphere. If you care about the future of our children, and you care about the future of your environment, and if you don't want this area to be known as a sacrifice zone, just say no.
I think Canada is actually a leader in this field. Finland would beat us, I guess. It's being done in the whole world, and like Brad said, I think it'll generate a lot of interest. I was trying to say before about the willingness. The Center of Excellence. Just having the people from Toronto, their offices, and all these blue shirts here, and them and their families living in this community would certainly help our schools and keep our schools in place and probably enhance our living standards. I would hope that it would happen here. Of course, there's no guarantees, but I'm confident that it can be done. If you think positively and we make your vote, make sure it comes from your heart so you know that you're helping your community, and think of your community. Not in the fact that it's going to kill you, because I don't think this thing can kill you, because it's been well proven that it's been done safely for the last 70 years. And anyway, also I got to mention about maybe it might end some poverty.
Thank you, Lionel. Okay, Ignace, if we decide we're informed and a willing host, we make that declaration. That does not mean the project is starting tomorrow. It means that the holes aren't going to be dug in the next couple of weeks, and they're not going to start pouring some kind of liquid into the ground. All it means is that we were a willing host community. And willing for what? To thrive and develop with the DGR project. We want to look forward to being involved in the next steps. So what is the next steps? The next steps is going to be the licensing and assessment impact, or impact assessment process. It'll take about 10 years. And the public, the neighbors, the neighboring communities, the First Nations, the people on the route all the way from New Brunswick to Ignace, they'll have a formal opportunity to submit their arguments. Their arguments, however, will have to be backed with science and facts. They're going to be submitting to the regulator, which is the CNSC. They'll make that decision. The subjective and emotional arguments are going to be removed at that stage. There has to be something that's legitimate. The regulatory body will make the decision, the CNSC, not Ignace. Ignace is deciding if we want to be willing. That's all, willing to move to the next step. Unlike, I don't want to debate or anything, but I'm not going to tell you how to vote. All I'm going to say is, when it comes to decision, your time to make the decision, make an informed decision and do it based on what you know and what you want to see for Ignace. The only other one thing I say is that 3 minutes is not a long time to talk. So if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards, I live in town. You can come and see me anytime. I walk my dog every day. You'll see it in the grocery store. Come and ask me, and I'll tell you, I'll expand on all these things for you, okay?
So thank you, panelists, for your perspectives, your voice, and your knowledge to the audience today. Stay tuned. We will have a panel of youth presenting next.
And well done, Dodie.